Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me for Mobile Web Thursdays. Sorry for the slight technical issues with the broadcasting live. We had some minor issues just as we were about to go through. We were actually really organised as well, which is kind of a shame. My name is Matt Gaunt. I'm a developer advocate on the Chrome team, and what this session is going to be about is just the approach that I take when I'm developing a mobile site, whether that be responsive or specific to mobile, kind of up to you. But I think a lot of the things that I do, I kind of don't want to get certain things where I have to start writing scripts and forcing things to happen and regularly start running tools. So things like CSS minification, HTML5 minification, all these little simple things that should really just be done for me. And I essentially have a setup that does that. So what I'm going to introduce you to is a tool called Yeoman, which if you're not familiar with, it's essentially a way of scaffolding a project. It kind of gives you a good set of defaults for when you're starting a new project. I'm then going to be talking about some of the tools that it gives you specific, so things like auto prefixing, so you no longer have to write vendor prefixes. We're also going to be looking at library loading, how that can help you with development, especially how that starts applying to mobile devices as well as simulators. Talk about some of the cross-device approaches that you can take, and then also some of the things that are mobile specific, things like network conditioning. So how do you get an impression of what your mobile users are experiencing on their actual mobile devices when they're out and about on a 2G or a 3G connection versus what you're seeing on your development machine, where ultimately everything is local, so the speed should be surprisingly fast, and it doesn't really cater for a real world scenario. So what I'm going to do first off is create just a simple Yeoman project. So if I get Paul to shift me over to my machine. Yeah, there we go. So what I'm going to do is create a new directory for this project, GDL workflow. So if I go in there, now to create a new project, all I have to do is type yo web app. So this is just kicking off Yeoman and saying create me a new web app project. So the website for this is yeoman.io. To get it installed is really nice and simple. So if I start yo web app, we get this beautiful little gentleman. And what it'll do is it'll give me some preset defaults, so HTML5, boilerplate, jQuery, and modernizer. But then it's also going to run through a couple of questions of certain things that I may or may not want. So in this case, there's Twitter Bootstrap for Sass, which I'm not too fussed about. Require.js, I always like that for my JavaScript. And this is a new one that's literally only just come in, and it's a little bit half-baked. There's still a couple of fixes that the Yeoman team are putting in, but I'm really excited about it, so I'm going to be showing you a little bit of what that can do. Now what this goes and does is it starts setting up a number of those requirements, those dependencies. So things like jQuery, it will go and download the latest version, same as Modernizer. So what I'm going to do is just show you what the file structure is like. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to install some of the dependencies that NPM needs. So while that's going and doing its thing, so if I could get this to zoom in, that would be great. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. So this is the project that I've created with Yeoman, and basically within this file structure you'll notice you've got a set of files as well as a set of directories. So the app directory is essentially where all your source code is going to go, all your CSS, JavaScript and HTML. We then have bower.json. Now if you're not familiar with Bower, what this is essentially a set of front-end libraries, and Bower is a tool that you can use to just get those dependencies, install them, so things like jQuery. And then it will also give you a quick way of updating them as well. Grunt is a new tool which you can kind of think of as a helper. So if you said you wanted to do a certain task, you could say, Grunt, perform this task for me. So an example would be CSS minification. You could have a specific task for that. But the nice thing with Grunt is you can actually put multiple tasks together into one thing. Node modules, this is what we're downloading from NPM. Package.json is the actual list of dependencies that we have, and then test, where we actually have a set of unit tests and frameworks. So if we go into app, which, oh, there we go. Sorry, my machine went a bit slow. And again. There we go. So we've got a set of defaults that you'll be familiar with, things like fav.ico, 404.html, index.html, robots.txt, scripts and styles, and then Bower components is things like jQuery, Modernizer, and require.js. So if we actually look at what index.html consists of, it's given us some default styling and text that the idea with this is that you're going to delete it anyway. But if I open it with Sublime, this is where you'll start to see where HTML5 boilerplate has come in. So we've already got things like a viewport, device width. You'll notice that we started adding in default styles, and I'll go over some of the nice things that Grunt's given you with that, Modernizer, and then also we've got a lot of things around the Chrome frame, Google Analytics, as well as require.js already plumbed in. So the main reason I like using Yeoman by default is that if I wanted to now view this website and have a server running with all the JavaScript, etc., all I have to do is just type grunt server. And what this goes and does is it prepares all of my Sass, all of my JavaScript, etc., and compiles it down into the page. So then I've already got a server ready on my machine. I don't need to go and set up MAMP or anything like that. It just runs a small Python server on my machine. And the way this is working is essentially when you type in grunt server, you're actually sitting there and saying, Grunt, I want you to run your task name server, which if we go and look down at the very bottom in the grunt.js file, it's actually just running this task here. And this is really powerful in the sense that you can start getting live reload plumbed in for you. You don't need to add it in yourself. So I'm just going to briefly go through what Grunt is actually doing. So up at the top we have this live reload port as well as snippet, and all this is doing is when you run a server, there we go, if I just zoom in it might be a bit easier to see. So essentially all this is doing is saying what port would you like the live reload server to run on, and then it prepares a snippet. So whenever you run grunt server, it'll actually insert the live reload code for you only when you're in grunt server. So if you want to distribute this, you can run grunt build. It will produce a distribution ready version for you, and it won't include the live reload code for you. We then have a set of common defaults. So here you'll have app and distribution. So app is actually the directory where we're going to have all our development files, and dist is going to be where we're going to create the distribution ready version. Watch is essentially the thing that's going to be listening for certain files that they change. So when they change, live reload knows to update for it. So we've got things like Sass, Compass, Coffee files, things along those lines. Connect is where we actually set up the initial server. By default, you have localhost. It's only accessible on this machine. If you want to make it accessible to other mobile devices on your network, which we're going to want, you need to change that to 0.0.0.0. And then we've got a number of different things. So we've got tests and distribution, which again, the grunt build is going to deal with. Clean will actually make sure that whenever you do another distribution build, you're removing all the old files. JS hint will actually get fired off whenever you try and produce a build as well. So during your development, you can sit there, write the JavaScript, and it will produce it all nicely. And then at the end, when you try to produce a final build, it'll actually get JS hinted. So essentially any wrong things that you're doing, things that you should be improving on, you're going to be told about it. Then we obviously got things to do with Compass, Sass, auto prefix, of which I'm going to show you a demo of in a minute, require.js, a whole chain of things that you can see here. So the best way that I can show you all of this is if I go and produce a new Sass file. So I'm going to name this main.sass, and what I want to do as well is copy over the existing stuff. So where we've already got the existing styles, I don't want them anymore. So what I'm going to do is just move those over to trash. So what this is now doing is I've refreshed it, so it should start pulling in the new file already. And if it's not, why not? Yeah, that should be there. There we go. So what I've done is just moved everything to a SCSS file, so we know that Compass is going to pull this. And one of the nice things with the auto prefixer that I was talking about is if I just type in display flex, normally you'd have to type in the WebKit equivalent, the Mozilla version, etc. And the idea with the auto prefixer is it knows that this is what you're trying to do. So if I now go to this page, what it should do is start applying those styles in line. So if I go to the inspect element for this page where I've applied display flex, what you should be able to see is where we've originally just typed in display flex, the auto prefixer has already added in WebKit box, WebKit flex, MS flexbox. At the moment it's not doing Mozilla prefixes, but I think that's just a bug that the Yeoman team's already working on. So I'm actually going to change that to .container. So that should actually produce something slightly more sane. There we go. No, it hasn't. Damn. Why haven't you worked? Okay, it's not important anyway. But the idea with this is essentially that you're already getting to a point where it should simplify things. And obviously, if it comes to a point where this isn't quite working for you because there's not enough, or you need the Mozilla things now, you can literally start using Compass in this as well. So do the @include display flexbox, and that will start coming into play for you as well. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is, even if we've got this build process where we're adding in additional prefixes, one of the key things is this minification. You want to reduce the size of your CSS and JavaScript. So if I write grunt build, what this is actually going to do is start doing all of the hard and heavy lifting for me so that I don't need to do it. So what it's doing is running through uglify, CSS min, HTML min, and once it's finished, you can go back to your main directory, and you notice we've now got this dist build. Now what this is it's the minified version of everything. So if I open this up in Chrome, it's exactly the same page, but if I inspect some of the CSS, where can I find some CSS? Yeah, there. I'm gonna, you know what? Let's open it in Sublime, that'll be a bit easier, won't it? So firstly, you already noticed that it's already added like an ID to this file where it's been compiled for you, and Grunt will actually inject that into the web page, so you don't need to worry about maintaining that. But you can see that it's already started adjusting the CSS. The only thing you have to be aware of is if you start using breakpoints in multiple files, it'll actually bring all the files into one. So you do sometimes need to name the files in numerical order is the best way that I've found. So you have 0, 1, 2. The main reason of that is the position of your media queries is important as to which one gets affected, which one's the actual one that applies to the style. It's the last one in the style sheet. So you need to make sure that they're added in the correct order. So all of this is good and well, but at the same time, we want to start using this on a mobile device. So we've got best practices in place. We're reducing all the file sizes, which is great for mobile, but how do we now start playing with this? So I've got a device set up with one of the cameras, which I think Paul is going to quickly shift over to. So at the moment we've got that mobile device, and then on my machine we want the two to start talking together. So if I go to my localhost 9000, at the moment that does nothing, and it would be great if we can join the two together. So on my desktop machine we've actually got this new plugin which has been written between Pavel and Paul Irish, and what this does is it gives you the ability to start looking at what ADB is seeing. Now ADB is the Android device bridge. So if you click on this, you'll notice we've got Start ADB and then View Devices. So if I kick this off, what it should start doing is fire off the ADB, the debug server essentially for the Android devices. And if I unplug and plug my device back in, you'll notice that it's now changed to number 1. So this is saying there's one device connected to this machine that it's aware of. So if I now click on View Devices, it'll open up Chrome Inspect, which is where we'll now start seeing this Galaxy Nexus, which is the device I have here. And one of them is localhost 9000, which we had open. So if I click on Inspect, what this is doing is opening up the dev tools for this device, so the Chrome beta running on here. And if I click on the options, I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit. There we go. So under the Experiments tab for the dev tools, I've got Enable Reverse Port Forwarding, which then brings up port forwarding. And there I've entered in just a mapping for 9000 to 9000. So what that's doing is saying, on my local machine, I have port 9000, map it to the device's port 9000. So when I now hit refresh on our device, we'll get this. So now I can actually start playing around with the elements right from DevTools like you normally would on the desktop. So we're going to go, hello GDL, you guys rock. So already you're starting to be able to play around with the DevTools that you're used to on your mobile device. The one problem with this is obviously it works for Chrome for Android, but it's not necessarily a cross-browser solution. This is particularly useful when you want to start looking at performance timelines and other things that are specific to the DevTools in Chrome. But if you want to start testing across a range of devices, at that point you need to start looking at how you're going to essentially connect your local machine to any device. So I've got an iPhone with me, and the only way, the best way to do it essentially at the moment seems to be to have all the devices connected on the same network and make the server on your local machine available to these other devices. And there are a couple of tools out there that add additional features to this. So you've got like Adobe Inspect, you've got Remote Preview, which is an open source tool. The one thing that they tend not to offer though is the ability to just say, here's a URL, launch across devices. So there is still a little bit of legwork that you need to do. But because we've done Grunt server and we've changed the host name to 0000, what I can do is just connect to the IP address of my machine when I get this iPhone working. It will work. Or maybe it won't. So server's running on my machine. Okay, maybe it won't work. We always have slight issues in the Google Studio in the sense that we've got multiple networks going off at different times. But anyway, one of the main disadvantages of doing this at the very moment is you have to also open up a port for live reloading on your Android device as well as your development console. So often it's a good option to sit there and go for 000 on the same network, because at that point when you're pointing to this specific machine, what Grunt will also take care of is it'll inject the IP address of your machine for the live reload file as well. So if I could get the demo working on the iPhone, what would happen is when I start editing my main SAS file, so I could actually say, I can show you a demo of it in the browser, where normally I'd be able to sit there and say, hey, I don't like this color, I'm going to change it to black. That should go and, no, helps if I was in the right file. So if I change that to 000, what this will then do is notice a change in the Grunt file. Stop breaking. It'll notice a change in the SAS file, and then it should actually kick off a live reload on the server, which will then update all the browser channels. Why it's not, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I remember. So I apologize, I'm on a cutting edge version of Yeoman. So occasionally I have the brunt of issues. What I did there was a current issue with no spawn equals true, which actually results in some weird quirks, which the team have already fixed, but I haven't quite pulled the fix yet myself. So the idea here is, again, like I said, there we go. When I change the SAS file, it should already update the web page. And the problem here is this actually requires a certain port that I can't get going on this device. So like I said, use the network IP address for the machine, and then everything should start playing nicely. So let's say all of this was good and well. We go through all this process. We've got minified CSS and JavaScript. We've tested it on a range of devices, and we're ready to launch it. One of the big things that you're never going to really experience on your device is the network speed of a mobile device while you're developing locally, especially when you're on the various networks. Now, one of the ways you can do this is there are a couple of proxy tools out there that will actually enable you to restrict the speed that you have available to these devices, essentially any connections going in and out of your laptop. So one of the examples here is network link conditioner. So if I, nope. And essentially what this will do when I enable it, I'm not going to use the worst connection ever because I tried that once, and that's a user preset that I did, and I actually need network connection to log into my machine. So then that was a bit weird. Anyway, so what essentially, if I go to my own website here, because I know it's a particularly bad example for this, unfortunately, I get quite fast reload times. And that's because I'm on a good solid Ethernet connection, whereas if I hit the network link conditioner, then if I hit refresh, you'll notice that the network speed is going to be much, much slower. Now I'm also noticing that I'm streaming this to the box through the network, so I'm wondering whether that's going to affect it. But anyway, you notice that the speed time actually started slowing down. I've actually done a little bit of work to improve this. I've swapped out some of the PNGs for JPEGs and compressed them a little bit. But I've got an example where before I had done any of that, I'd actually recorded the two side by side in the emulator. So if you look at my web page, my desktop, yep, there we go. So if I just kick this off, what this is going to do is load the page roughly about the same time, but you'll notice that the speed difference is quite hefty. And not only is it kind of a good indication of what your website's going to be like for these users, but often you can almost find situations where if the fonts and the text actually loaded before any of the background images, sometimes you can actually get away with just setting a background color. So that way, if you've got a light font and you've actually just been putting it on a white page, if you just set a background color, that text suddenly becomes readable and it's quite usable. I use link conditioner OXX. There is also Charles, which I think is a cross-platform proxy tool as well. So the main reason why I encourage people to look at Yeoman as well as Grunt is the sense that what we're doing is looking at how people are actually developing on mobile devices, especially what kind of tools they're bringing in and whether there are certain things we can automate for them. So one of the things that I'm hopefully going to start trying to do is look at WebP. So you should only ever have to produce PNG files or JPEGs, and then there should be a way of just automatically compressing them to WebP. There's also kind of a lot of discussion between the group of us of how we could actually produce source sets and other things like that. And plus, it's kind of getting to that point where if there's certain things that you want to do, like you want to launch a browser stack instance with localhost tunneled through, there are Grunt tasks for browser stack as well as Source Labs and a lot of the other tools. So at that point, you can almost imagine a scenario where instead of going Grunt server, you could say Grunt browser stack and set up a task on your machine, and it would actually just start setting that up for you. And even if there are particular build steps for your specific project, you can create those tasks. So I'm sorry I couldn't show you the iPhone network connection along with the live reloading. There are a lot of things going on with the Yeoman project. I know the team are working really, really hard. And a lot of the changes that are going to come in quite soon are actually going to improve this flow even better than what it already is. So I definitely encourage you to go check it out if you haven't already. Beyond that, I'd love to know what your process is, what sort of things you're doing. And generally, if you start giving this a go, give us as much feedback as you can, because I'd love to know where the pain points are for you. Other than that, thank you for watching. I hope it's been useful.